Well, welcome back. Last night we celebrated the creators, and now it's time for them to share their secret sauce during this next panel discussion, which is sponsored by Keurig Dr. Pepper. Joining us briefly on stage is Shane Wheatland, Head of Food Service Marketing for Keurig Dr. Pepper. Please welcome Shane. Shane, welcome.
Hey, Susan. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You know, last night we celebrated the creators, and there's a lot of innovation that's been happening with them. So tell me a little bit about Keurig Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. And first, congratulations to all the creator nominees and award winners. We're thrilled to be part of it. KDP, for those that aren't familiar, about 3 years ago, Keurig, one of the world's largest coffee companies, and Dr. Pepper, one of the most available brands in the US, came together and did so with purpose. That purpose was to really kind of help create and drive some innovation. So imagine all the capabilities, the brands, the infrastructure coming together, and that translated really nicely to our food service division.
Nice, nice. Well, with all this innovation, with all this insights, is there anything new on the horizon that you will be bringing to the food service industry for 2022 that you'd like to tell our audience about?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty, obviously, especially over the last year and a half, but it's probably in about 5 or 6 key areas. If you go back to January of last year, the focus for us was to translate those capabilities into product development. So everything across, obviously, typical fountain innovation, things we're doing with Canada Dry across the US and others, but really getting into everything from craft lemonades, limeades, aquas frescas. As you think about the off-premise business and the growth there, how do we create things that travel well, that last, and then also start to look at some unique formulations that are customizable for our customers based on their brand, on their consumers, whether or not they want to brand it themselves, white label it. These are all the things that we kind of innovated during the pandemic to figure out how do we break the mold and really relook at it. But before all the product innovation, it was really insights innovation, to move away from just innovation itself, but look at revelation. And those insights really help to drive those big ideas, those revelation type of ideas that then leads into innovation in products. And so there's insights capabilities right now to help the industry understand exactly what their consumers are thinking, what they're feeling at that moment, and some analytics to really understand what's driving sales. But between products and innovation on insights, it really led into packaging for off-premise. It went into digital commerce. And so we've partnered with some of the most really groundbreaking technology companies for the restaurant industry to figure out how does your UA or your UI on your online ordering platforms look. How do you optimize third-party delivery, optimize loyalty, tap into the guest insights, and then start to gather those insights and that data to go figure out what's your product development look like, and hopefully all of us start to really reevaluate what the beverage looks like in restaurants and just break those handcuffs so that we can really create new products that meet those consumer needs.
That's fantastic. Well, I know we thank you for sponsoring the Creators Awards. We know that you have a lot of new products and a lot of new insights, and I think this is the perfect conference
Absolutely.
To bring that together. Yeah. So I'm going to welcome Sam Okus to the stage. I'm going to thank you, Shane. Oops.
Thank you, Susan.
Oops.
All right.
And Sam Okus is our editor-in-chief, and he's going to bring our Creators panel onto the stage.
Hey,
Welcome,
everybody.
Sam.
Good morning. Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much to Keurig Dr. Pepper for sponsoring this session. I apologize. I've been talking so much for 3 days that I'm going to sound like this for this session. But I think that's a good sign, right? That means we've been having good conversations. So last night, we awarded our inaugural Creators Awards. What we want to do, though, is get into the stories of why we gave those people and those organizations those awards. What did it mean to embody a spirit of innovation? We have 4 of our winners here tonight, and we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty about innovation at their organizations and what they are doing to innovate and what they've done in the past year and how they're setting their organizations up for innovation in the future. So to start, it is my pleasure to welcome Brinker's Wade Allen, the head of innovation, to come out and chat about their It's Just Wings concept. Welcome, Wade.
Hey, thanks.
And congratulations. So Wade, let's start by talking about, just to set some context, I think a lot of you have probably heard about It's Just Wings, but we're talking about a brand that essentially overnight opened 1,000 locations and became a $170 million brand just like that. Where did that start? Because I think this started before the pandemic, but before we were talking about virtual concepts all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say it was easy and we just launched it in a heartbeat. Probably a year before we actually launched, we had been doing tons of R&D. I told Jeff Hannock, our head of culinary, this. We were talking about this a couple months ago, but 4 or 5 years ago on a whiteboard in one of the offices, we had listed virtual brands and virtual kitchens, right? This idea, but it hadn't really taken off. And I think mobility and some of these other things have driven towards that. But the story started probably a year before, and we started tooling around with food trucks of all things. That was kind of where we started. And it was a totally different concept that we were kind of playing with. And then we realized that food trucks is a tough business, and there's a reason why people who are in the food truck business are trying to get into the restaurant business. So we abandoned that project, and then we moved over to this idea of like, hey, we have these assets, right? We have 1,000 plus assets on the ground today that are underutilized. How do we leverage that a little bit? So we started working on a concept in California. It was a different food concept. It was a burrito concept. Working with a restaurateur out there and working through what that would look like. And we kind of worked through a couple of our restaurants and used some of the product on the line and then added a few SKUs. And then I think we came to the epiphany of like, hold on a second. Like we are Brinker. We're brand builders. We understand the food business. We understand restaurants. We understand P&Ls. Let's do this our own way. And so we kind of at that point made the decision to go towards our own thing without having a kind of an added restaurateur or innovation mind, just take our team and knock it out. But even then, we hadn't decided on the wings concept. We were leaning more into the brand that we're now rolling, which is the Maggiano's Italian Classics brand first. And Jeff Hannock and the team came and said, hey, wings is a big idea. We already got them in the restaurant. We can create some great sauces. We can make this virtual opportunity really work. And so we said, well, let's go do it. And that was right at the moment of when the pandemic was at its height. And we had plans to actually come to Denver and do some testing out here. Okay. And we tapped the brakes and said, let's just stay in Dallas. And so we ran a series of tests in our assets in Dallas using that wings concept. And they were, screaming successful. And so we said, okay, let's do this. And we charged the hill. And kudos to Wyman, right? I mean, if you don't know Wyman Roberts, is one of the pinnacle players in the restaurant space. I just have a ton of admiration for him, but he's also very conservative. And so we, appealed to his better side and said, come on, let us do this. And he agreed and said, courage, he had huge courage and said, let's go in the middle of a pandemic. And we launched it on June 23rd to 1,000 plus kitchens in kind of a shotgun start.
Yeah.
It was wheels off at that point.
Yeah,
right?
so tell me about that, because, it sounds like, saying, oh, we rolled out a virtual brand is one thing, but 1,000 locations overnight, operationally speaking, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, just in full transparency, I was the CIO about 3 months before or maybe 2 months before I got tapped on the shoulder to come and actually deploy this, right? So I was working through making sure that we weren't doing it through tablets. So that's the first thing I would tell you is we didn't launch this with tablets in our restaurant. We did some testing with the tablets, but we fully integrated to the point of sale system so that our operators didn't have to go back and forth and fat finger from a tablet to a point of sale system and have problems with that order. So the work that was done prior to, I mean, it was Herculean. Like Margaret on my team that led that effort, just getting all those restaurants, everything from smallwares to all the product to the training materials to which restaurants when and how, which ones aren't going to get them because of certain, issues or struggles we may have. But for the most part, we went to the total brand, and the team, worked night and day to be prepared for that launch. And I'll tell you, just like any launch you have, everybody's on pins and needles because you really don't know how this is going to go. You've trained everybody, everybody's on, revving to go. You just don't know how it's going to go. And it came out of the gate red hot, right? I mean, it took off. Now that we also put a ton of effort, time, and strategy into understanding the algorithms on the delivery partner that we selected and ensured that we had the dollars, the marketing, and we're making sure that we're staying at the top of the carousels when it came to customers finding that product.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's demand for chicken wings. We've been talking about that now for the last year, but what else was so special about this? What made that work?
I mean, we were very strategic on who the customer was.
Okay.
I think people can get, people, right? I think brands can get lost on, virtual brands are easy. You spin up some things, you put your product out online, and you call it a different name, right? The secret sauce, and I won't give away too much of it, but I'll give away a little bit, right? It's know your audience, know who you're going to go after. One of it was we kept it true to the product that we already had in the restaurant with minimal SKU ads. We made sure we had a system, and what we call a system. So we have zones in our restaurant, and on one of our zones, right next to the fryer, it was a dedicated individual that knew what they were doing, and they had been trained on how to cook those wings and how to put those sauces on and fry the Oreos, right? Because we have this delicious fried Oreo that we're now transitioning to another product. But and then it was know your audience. We knew that this was straight down, the fastball, if you will, from the sports analogy for college kids, and it was a value brand. It was focused on that kind of male gaming and sports play, and we played right to that. Now, value was a critical piece of this because we give free fries. That was part of this, right? It was, hey, this is a value offering, and so we didn't have a lot of room in the margins to play with, hey, paying royalties out to somebody else, or paying a ton of money for packaging and other stuff. We kept it really tight, really true to what we thought that brand was supposed to be coming out of the gate.
You mentioned the Maggiano's virtual brand that you've launched since then. What are some other ways that It's Just Wings has really opened up some doors for you and showed you some new opportunities you might have?
Yeah, I mean, I think wings open the door in indicating that we have opportunity in our restaurants, capacity in the kitchen to deliver. I think it also has allowed us to recognize it's not a completely, there's a ceiling on that opportunity. So it's not you can put 50 brands into a current asset. You got to protect the core asset, and I say asset, the core brand that's running. So today in Chili's or Maggiano's, when we put a wings in, we were very careful to say, okay, this is how much extra capacity we have, this is what it can deliver. It also allowed us to say, okay, we think we can get another one. We can deploy another one, and that's where we're in the midst of deploying our Maggiano's Italian Classics, which are guest favorite dishes from Maggiano's, our physical restaurants that are in roughly 50 locations across the United States, and we're now taking that and allowing that to be developed and cooked in the back of a Chili's that gives us that massive footprint to meet the Italian demand. So systems, it was ensuring that you know your audience, and then using that asset to deploy the next one. But we don't have a completely untapped ceiling. It's really about a finite list of virtual brands that you can actually deliver without disrupting the core, and then really drive a lot of revenue through those two centers.
Now, Chili's and Maggiano's, I mean, these are two brands that when you think about those companies who were unfortunately poised to take the brunt of the pandemic for what we've been through, I mean, it sure seems like these strategies have really helped to blunt the force of that a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think any restaurateur in the room is going to tell you, in the midst of the pandemic, it's panic, right? It's trying everything you possibly can to make sure that the sales are coming in and that you keep your labor force and that you keep your business. As a big brand at Brinker, clearly we have a lot of muscle and strength in this place and a lot of capital at our disposal, but the truth of the matter is, in the midst of a pandemic, it was tough, right? And so these virtual brands, in particular Wings is the one that we had rolled, absolutely assisted the overall brand in keeping the lights on, keeping the doors open, not forcing us to furlough our employee and our managers, right? And now, as it's kind of emerged in this, whatever we're in, I don't know if we're in a post-pandemic, amidst the pandemic, a cycle of pandemic, but now it's about making sure that those brands continue to grow and are strong.
Sure.
And we're committed to this virtual world and these virtual brands. We think they're very real and tangible, and they are. Right? They delivered last year $170 million system-wide. So it's a stream of revenue and a business that we're going to continue to invest in.
It's great. Well, it got our attention, which is why we were very honored to be able to give you the Creator of the Year last night, and as well as the Brand Creator for 200 plus units. So congratulations on that success. We're going to have Wade stay out here, and I'm going to welcome our next panelist, representative from Portillos, which was our Brand Creator for under 200 units, Derek Pratt, the COO of Portillos. Let's welcome him to the stage. Derek, join us.
Hi, everybody.
Pick a
Hello.
seat.
Just pick a seat.
Yeah, sure, whichever one.
All right.
So Derek, in the last couple of weeks, we've all gotten a peek under the hood at Portillos a little bit here as you guys file your IPO.
PS1, yeah.
And that peek under the hood was, wow. There were numbers that I don't think any of us have ever seen in this industry.
Me too.
Yeah,
Me too.
it blew you away too, just as much, huh?
Yeah.
So, Derek, well, first off, let's start with what's special about this brand. I mean, because this is very confined to Chicago, with a few exceptions currently. So, for those of the folks in the audience who don't know much about this brand, tell us what's so special about it.
Have you had a dipped beef sandwich before?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's it. That's all it is,
Yeah.
right?
Well, first of all, craveable food. I mean, it's nirvana. The Maxwell Street Polish. If you haven't had one, go get it soon. We ship to all 50 states, right? So if we're not in your hometown, we'll ship to you. Craveable food, incredible volumes, which bring a lot of energy, right? Energy is just there's almost a show in our drive-through, in our dining experience, in our bar area, where we do a ton of catering, third-party delivery, takeout, you name it, curbside. Our iconic and nostalgic patio spaces. We call them patios, where people actually make it a destination. We sit in this kind of enigmatic space between QSR and casual dining. We can run a 2-lane or 3-lane drive-through and get you through quickly. We can be a destination in the dining area. We can be of service in a party, right, where we do tons of $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 orders for different companies and businesses. We are omni-channel, very focused, very energetic, with craveable food, with fantastic people.
Yeah.
That's special.
So, but you guys didn't, just sit back and just coast through the pandemic. I mean, you have this incredible loyalty, so I'm sure you might have been okay even if you hadn't had made some of these operational changes, but you did tweak around, and make some innovations within the operation of Portillos. I know there was some labor redeployment that you guys did. I know you guys went into some first-party delivery or in-house delivery.
Yeah.
You were making sure you kept your staff employed by figuring out what you could do with them, including that delivery. And then you rolled out a new prototype. There were a lot of operational changes. Tell us a little bit about what inspired those changes and what some of those changes have been, how much the pandemic had to do with that.
Yeah, well, I think the pandemic had some to do with it, but I think, kind of the values that we live by in the company that was our North Star, right? It's family, greatness, energy, and fun. Family. The pandemic just said you have a crisis. Family told us that we needed to take care of people. That means get them fed, keep them safe, keep them alive, right? Make sure they have certainty, a place to be, a place to go. We furloughed, we laid no one off. 0 throughout the pandemic.
Incredible.
That was an incredible decision made quickly because it was value-centered, family. Greatness. At our peak volumes, 14 million, 15 million, we deploy 52 people on a shift.
Wow.
You can't be very socially distant with 52 people on a shift.
That's right.
So we had to modify our labor model overnight, literally, create a new grid that allowed for social distance, multi-channel service, safety, and capacity. We did it literally overnight. So this is a nimble company that's poised for growth. I'm excited about our potential there. So those are a couple of examples. Our menu, right? Volume times complexity can be trouble when you're talking about reduced capacity, reduced people, space constraint. That can be trouble. Almost overnight, we reduced 26 menu items and 75 SKUs.
Wow.
Right? Simplified that menu. So I say growth is great, but being able to scale innovation, even better.
And all this comes back to the consumer experience, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, what you're doing is you're trying to improve the consumer experience. And again, the loyalty of Portillos is among the tops in the industry. So how are you constantly trying to improve the consumer experience? What does that challenge look like, and how do you accomplish that through innovation?
Well, I use the word intimacy. I think we try to maintain, as a matter of fact, we're maniacally focused about maintaining an intimate relationship with our guests. We're constantly communicating, whether it be focus groups, through our overall satisfaction mechanisms, just showing up, being in the restaurant and talking to people who are really fanatics and obsessed with Portillos, they give us a lot of feedback. And we care deeply about that. And so if you know the Chicagoland folks, they're extraordinarily passionate about what they believe in. And so we have a plethora of feedback we get from them.
Yep.
And remaining consistent, nostalgic, and meeting the needs that they have while innovating can be a challenge. But I often say innovation protects, right, your legacy.
Yep.
Right? As long as you're intimate with your guests, you're intimate with what your people need and value, you'll be where you need to be from an innovative perspective.
Well, I'm curious about that because this is a brand that's been around decades.
Yeah.
And so it's this legacy concept. What do you have to protect as you innovate? How do you protect that legacy and you don't need that nostalgia without going too far into the future?
Yeah, it's interesting. First of all, I mentioned this last night. 2019, pivotal year for us, some would say it was an inflection point, right? Our sales for several previous quarters were lagging. We'd lost our way. We went through a series of work with outside consultants, but our frontline team members to define who we are from a purpose perspective, because we had lost our purpose. And so the protection is about staying focused on who you are first, how people see you, how your guests and employees believe you show up in a space. For us, it's about unrivaled food and experiences. It's about the energy and the atmosphere that we create, so that there are pieces. I heard Wade talk about protect the core, that we call our core. That's the energy and excitement, the nostalgia, our drive-through, right? What happens in our bar space, rhymes when you pick your food up, right? Whimsical fun, things that are core to who we are. And then as the business and the market changes, we evolve around that, whether it be channel demand, channel focus, self-delivery, right? All these things that are important to the environment from a macro perspective, but we never lose sight of what our core business is.
Yeah, and talking about the future,
Yeah.
I mentioned the new prototype. I think 3 drive-through lanes
Yeah.
in a location.
Yeah.
Tell us about what does the Portillos of the future look like? How have you used this season to kind of take a big swing with what the Portillos could look like of the
Yeah,
future?
the Portillos of the future looks like where our guests want us to be, right? Our channel demand has shifted from dine-in to more curbside catering, takeout, for obvious reasons. So we know that we operate the drive-through like nobody else. We do average $2.2 million in the drive-through alone. That's most than most QSRs.
Right.
Right? And so what we figured is that if there's going to be curbside takeout, third-party delivery, whether we're doing it or somebody else is doing it, how can we make that seamless and frictionless in our drive-through space? How can we leverage productivity that we've already deployed to that space where we have greatness, while maintaining the iconic and energetic and really high throughput core drive-through business that we have? This is an example of innovation and legacy in the same space.
Sure. That's very exciting, Derek. Thank you for giving us a little bit more of a peek under the hood for Portillos. I really appreciate it. I'll have you slide over and sit next to
Sure.
Wade here. We are now going to welcome our third panelist to the stage, who won the Leadership Creator Award, and that is James Fripp, the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Yum Brands. James, welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
So James, when we made a Leadership Creator, our intention with that was to say that there's incredible operations happening in the restaurant industry, but clearly restaurants are more than just the operation, they're more than just the food. It's about people. And I mean, has there ever been a season like what we've been through in the past year and a half where people innovation has been more important, not only because of the pandemic, but of course because the diversity conversation, especially following the murder of George Floyd, has become incredibly important for us to have. So why we were honored to give you this award was because Yum Brands has done incredible work in putting its money where its mouth is and actually doing that work. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that. So James, if you could just start, we talked a couple days ago about the talent pipeline in the restaurant industry and how diversity, you really have to look across the entire scale of the restaurant to make the whole organization more diverse. And Yum Brands, largest restaurant company in the world, so that's a big job. Tell us about what your impression is of the talent pipeline today for restaurants and how you're tackling this from the diversity perspective.
Yeah, we, in our restaurants, I mean, clearly we are very, very diverse at the restaurant level, and will continue to be as demographics continue to shift and change that way. What we're really focused on is how do we take that amazing talent that's at the restaurant level and bring that into the corporate environment, bring that into our franchise ownership environment, and continue to make that work. And so we've done a number of things to kind of bring that to life. And during this past year, you mentioned this whole notion of what we putting our money where our mouth is. We created something called the Unlocking Opportunities Initiative. And the Unlocking Opportunities Initiative is focused on 3 areas. It's focused on equity and inclusion, it's focused on education, and it's focused on entrepreneurship. And what we're doing with the Unlocking Opportunities Initiative is saying we're going to put $50 million and from a foundation perspective and $50 million from a G&A perspective, invest that money into making sure we do drive diversity all throughout the restaurant level, and we bring some of our folks who are in the restaurants to leadership and into the corporate environment. And then not only inside the organization, but externally, what we're doing is we've created, in partnership with the University of Louisville, we created something called the Yum Global Franchise Excellence University. And so inside the University of Louisville, there's a great young lady, her name is Dr. Kathy Gasser, who's been over 30 years with us at Yum, is now on staff at the University of Louisville, and she is our lead partner in creating this global finance organization in concert with Wanda Williams, who heads up our franchising. And what that does is we're literally not limited to our Yum associates, but holistically, what people can do is go get certified, a certification in franchising, or they can get a full-on degree in franchising. And our goal is to take underrepresented people of color and underrepresented communities and get people sponsorships through this program so they can learn to become franchisees, whether that's a franchisee of our organization and our brands, or become a franchisee of or an entrepreneur in their own right for whatever it is they want to do. So, so that's one of the things that we're doing, but we're very focused on making sure that it's not the word of the day. It's not because of what happened just this past year. It becomes embedded in all that we do, both in our organization and supporting communities, not only domestically, but around the globe.
How much would you say the past year and a half has changed this conversation that we're all having? I mean, we've obviously been having that conversation for a while, but clearly last year, it was clear that we had to really double down on that conversation and start to do some work. How has the past year changed that conversation, and then what has Yum done to respond to the ways that's changed?
Yeah, the conversation in and of itself, I mean, as everybody knows, I mean, the conversation just blew up, and people started doing all kinds of things in our organizations, all of our organizations. What do we say? How do we say it? When do we say it? Who do we say it to? And what if we mess it up? And so what we did was created these conversations, town halls, where we were able to just get on, and myself and some of my peers who work in the space with me, we would get in these conversations and just create the environment where we could talk about how people were feeling in the moment, what they were going through. All of the panels were multicultural. We had majority members, minorities. I mean, we just had everybody on the call. And people were just sharing. They were sharing what they're experiencing, why it was affected in the way it was, how people of color in those moments, while wanting to be able to share, were also feeling overly burdened, because a lot of companies are like, hey, look, so you're black, come talk to the group.
Right.
You know, and how are you feeling right now? And people were getting exhausted with, you know, how are you doing? What are you feeling? And so we created an environment and had those conversations. The other conversation that we needed to have and continue to have is there's folks who are feeling left out of this conversation. And that's our majority males. A lot of the conversations that we're having is about people of color and things like that. And they're like, so where am I at? We're talking a lot about gender for us. I mean, we talk about gender parity. We're going to be there through our organization, all through senior leadership at all levels globally. We're going to be at parity by 2025. but from a underrepresented people of color and communities, we've got some room to go. But what we did was we just created these conversations and really focused on helping our majority folks understand that this is not a zero-sum game. Not everybody, there's not a winner and a loser here. This is a win-win opportunity for us. We talk about in the context of our organization of being RED, relevant, easy, and distinctive. And when we think about being relevant, that requires you to have everybody at the table at all levels of the organization, not just some. And so in doing so, if we understand the value there in being relevant, if we're relevant, that means it creates more business. If it creates more business, then it creates more jobs, not for some people, but for all people. So that's what we've been focused on in terms of having those conversations and having that come to life. And let me just give you one other factoid in terms of talking about this space called diversity. We talk about it in our organization in the context of equity, inclusion, and belonging. But if you really understand how this impacts the business, one quick example. When you look at what's going on with demographics in the United States, and you look at the Hispanic Latinx community, African American, and if you look at multicultural or two or more races, that's where all the growth is coming from. And just from the Latinx community in and of itself, when you look at the years of buying power that demographic has, if you look at our non-Hispanic white demographics, it's about 36.7 years of buying power, effective buying power. When you look at the Latinx community, it's 56.5 years. And so if you say, okay, great, so if they have 56.5 years of buying power, and I don't have representation of that demographic, which is clearly going to impact my business in the long term, I should probably make sure that I have that representation in my organization.
Yep.
Same applies for African American, same applies for this notion of multicultural or two or more races. Those demographics continue to grow. And so why that matters is if we don't have that representation in our organization up through our leadership ranks, what we're seeing right now is people are choosing. And they won't choose your company, they won't choose us if they don't see folks who look like them. Not just, there's plenty of us in the restaurants. Who's in leadership? And there's one organization called Consortium for Graduate Study and Management. And if you just look them up, but effectively what they do is they take some of the top underrepresented communities of color, make sure these kids get through some of the 20 of the best colleges in the United States. And many of them are diverse, underrepresented people of color. What they are told is before you go interview with an organization, look at the leadership of the organization and see what it looks like and see if you're represented there. And if you're not represented there, you may really want to dig deep about whether that's the right company for you, or you may want to choose to go to that company for a reason and a season, but not a lifetime. So there's a lot there. But over this past year, companies have said a lot of things. The question is, are you doing what you said you were going to do? And there's a number of organizations out there that are fact-checking us to make sure that we're doing that.
Right.
And for us, we feel very comfortable that we're making it happen.
So speaking of that, of course we've been having this conversation, but it's one thing to talk the talk, it's another thing to walk the walk. For those in this room who want to bring about change as it relates to diversity, what are practical things folks should be doing for their organizations right now to make sure they're pushing this forward?
Where you can, create safe environments to have the open dialogue where people feel like they can truly ask the questions that they always wanted to ask but were afraid to. And if you don't think that can happen, then tee the questions up yourself and create those environments and have the dialogue. Other tangible things that you can do that are working for us, we did something called a equity and inclusion commitment. So for every individual across the globe at or above restaurant level, so all the way up through our senior leaders, our CEOs, across the globe, everybody has to have an equity and inclusion commitment. They had to make a commitment of some sort. Now we gave them some guidelines. Some of that is, I'm going to go volunteer at a community that is not of my community. Others are like, I'm going to involve and engage myself and learn more about these different communities that are not mine, so I can learn how do I have this dialogue. Others were like, hey, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mentor somebody who's different than me. But everybody, regardless of level, had to make a equity inclusion commitment. And what we do is we check on it. We just came through mid-years, and it's on the mid-year IDP form. It talks about what your goals were for the year, how you're progressing against those goals, and where are you at on your equity inclusion commitment. The other thing that we've done that's worked really, really well for us is we always talk about mentorship, but we're doing some great work around reverse mentorships. And one quick example is our chief legal officer, majority male, late 40s, early 50s, is being reverse mentored by an individual. His name is Joe. Joe is an African-American male who does technical work on our Pizza US side. And what they've done is I got them together and said, Joe, here's your mentee, and chief legal officer, here's your mentor. And what it does is it takes the angst away from that senior leader to say, you're supposed to impart knowledge on this individual. What the senior leader's role is to learn from this individual what it means and what it is to be like in our organization as an African-American male. And I set up the relationship for 6 months. I can't get them apart now. I can't get them apart. And what came out of that was Scott learned, I said, our chief legal officer's name is Scott. Scott learned what it is to be an African-American male in our organization. But what he also learned is what it's like to be an African-American male in Louisville, Kentucky in this moment. What Joe goes through, how Joe has to think about how he shows up at work. And especially over the last year, Joe has really had to think about, specifically in Louisville, Kentucky, with Breonna Taylor and all that was going on there. He had to show up on screen in our virtual environment every single day, feeling what was going on in Louisville, Kentucky, all the divisiveness that was happening there, but he still had to show up very, very positive. He had to show up and do his job every day. And what Scott learned was the burden that carried for Joe and how he had to work through that and still show up as his best self. What ended up happening as a result of that is there's mentorship and then there's sponsorship. Scott has now become Joe's biggest sponsor. And as a result of that, Joe has now, he's in the process of moving from his technical role at Pizza Hut to joining the Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging team because of the sponsorship of not only Scott, but myself and others. But that reverse mentorship was golden in that it took away, they didn't talk about work. So Scott was going to tell Joe about, here's what you need to do at work to be successful. What they did was they built something that's near and dear to my heart, which is the art. They built authentic relationship that led to trust. And when you get the art, you can add the S, which is what happened for Joe, is Scott became his sponsor. So leverage that where you can, create the right expectation. It wasn't about work, it was about who they both are as people. By the way, they both also figured out that they both love music. So.
That's great. James, thank you so much for sharing a little bit more information about what you guys have been up to in this past year. I'm now going to welcome our final panelist to the stage. It's our Marketing Creator winner, co-founder of Virtual Dining Concepts, Robert Earl. Welcome him to the stage.
Gentlemen.
Robert, welcome. So Robert, I know you have a little bit in common with what Wade has going on at Brinker as we talk about this virtual brand concept. But what's so fascinating about what you guys are doing and why we wanted to give you a marketing specific award is how you're going about positioning these brands with influencers and celebrities and the way you've leveraged that to really ramp up success for this company. Tell us about the origins of Virtual Dining Concepts, how you tapped into that idea.
Sure. Well, Brinker are fortunate enough to have a celebrity in Wade. We had to go outside of that and reach out to people with social followings of 80 million or IP like NASCAR or a great chef like Guy Fieri or the Cake Boss to compensate. But my whole career has always had a combination with talent and celebrity and a view that PR is actually better than advertising. And that's always been our philosophy. We've always believed that if you read something that has clearly come from the advertiser, it has less chance of resonating. So that's been our thinking through my ownership of Hard Rock and Planet Hollywood and various other businesses. The thinking as well is compounded by anyone out here that is doing online delivery. There are a lot of costs involved with doing that, including what we call in-app advertising. And if one can find another way to balance that, great reviews, pricing, variety all help. Frequency of customers sometimes gets you on the algorithm to a higher position. But our philosophy has always been one of obtaining press.
So tell us about some of these celebrities in particular that you tapped into. The one that kind of blew my mind the most was Mr. Beast Burger, because I guess I'm old, but I had no idea who that was at first.
So I'd like to take credit for that, but truthfully, I think sometime early last year, my son came in, maybe even longer, all time is now blurring, came in and said, "I've signed Mr. Beast." And I said, "Who?" So Mr. Beast is a 23-year-old hailing from North Carolina who is a YouTuber, and he gets up to 80 million different views of his YouTubes, and we perceive him as the new class of celebrity. And he's very creative, and he particularly ignites an audience that ranges from 6-year-olds with the blessing of their parents, because everything that he stands for has been charitable and very professional, all the way up to at 11 o'clock at night, you can find him tweeting with Elon. And Elon is tweeting to him, and they're talking crypto. So he's a very interesting young man, and he was desirous of taking his fame and notoriety and going into partnership with us in a food brand. He eats burgers every day. He came and worked with us, and we developed a fairly simple operation. And for those of you in the audience that aren't familiar, our point of difference as a company is one of creating brands that, as well as being profitable for ourselves and our partners, assist anyone who has a kitchen in the outside world. So we are trying to create brands that fellow hospitality businesses might adopt. It's a franchise, but it's not a legal franchise. It doesn't need that. I'd call it a license. And it's very much the opportunity where the menu has been developed for you, the packaging has been developed for you, the PR advertising strategies have all been developed, and you are paying a fee in some form for that service. So we're out there constantly coming up with new brands, and we pride ourselves that we are restaurateurs talking to restaurateurs. We're not techies. We need to be a bit more techie because that's where the massive value is, as you all know. But that's our market position, and we take heed of your equipment and where you might be overtaxed or where you might be underutilized, and we're very conscious that you don't have to involve yourselves in extra labor. So we'd very much try and see what corner of the kitchen we could load up a little more, and miraculously the orders will come through, and you, the restaurant kitchen, were responsible for executing the product perfectly, we hope, and buying the food and the packaging and getting it ready and putting it at the front door for pickup. And we try to do everything else. So whereas great enterprise like Brinker have decided to do their own brand, it doesn't stop us constantly hitting up Wade, saying, guess what we've got next? And hey, why do you want the stress? And also, I genuinely believe that in all of our businesses, whatever size they are, whatever is the newest thing, becomes a distraction. We all gravitate towards it. And if it's successful, oh my God, do we desert our real problems? So that's part of my pitch as well. That hasn't worked on Wade yet, but I will not give up.
You better be careful, because the next brand, virtual brand coming out of Brinker is going to be led by a celebrity, I'm starting to think. So he's going to come on your territory.
I think he knows how to do that.
Tell us about the marketing perspective in particular, the relationship you have with the celebrities and influencers, and what expectations you have from them.
From a marketing perspective, the benefit of, and it's not just celebrity, it's IP. I use NASCAR as an example of that. They have a wonderful reach, and we approached them and they were extremely receptive, and we ended up doing an homage to the food from each of the racetracks, and we're adding some as things go on. So if you're lucky enough to spend 2 days at the Phoenix race, you could perhaps have a peanut butter jelly and banana deep fried in a white toast with a Captain Crunch coating. And as if that's not bad enough, you can then have bacon and maple syrup on top.
Are you the Chief Menu Innovation Officer too?
Of course. Well, I'm the chief taster.
There we go.
And they just had a race in Talladega this week, and over 100,000 people enjoyed what they call, I think it's called the big one. It's an 8-ounce good beef meatball, which of course they had to put some pork and Monterey Jack cheese in the middle. Then they deep fried and breadcrumbed it. Then they put barbecue sauce around the outside and pasta spaghetti underneath.
Oh boy.
And these are the signatures from the tracks. And currently, if you think about NASCAR, the majority of NASCAR fans don't get the benefit of going to the track. They enjoy it on Fox or NBC, and now they're starting to buy this and enjoying it at the same time. Or we're going to do lots of birthday parties for young NASCAR fans. So going back to your question, on the marketing side, they all bring something to the table, our partners. They ignite a separate audience, and we do a lot of what we call consumer direct, where their fans will order directly with us and not actually utilize the full service of the third-party platforms, but perhaps will have a contract with DoorDash with their car fleet, but not necessarily to look to their customer base.
Sure. So talking about some of those menu items, how do you avoid this being about novelty? How do you build a solid, long-standing brands with this strategy?
Well, the verdict on that will be in a few years' time.
Yeah.
We think we're doing that, and we think that most importantly, we're giving an additional profit center and focus for restaurants who historically all one can do is fill the bums on seats and then take your existing brand, and you mentioned that just now in one of the presentations, and take your existing brand and work out curbside pickup, delivery, third-party platform, drive-through, whatever else you're going to do. So now there's a third segmentation available to people. And what gave me the most pleasure just listening to you and us being here is think about how virtual has become part of the dialogue.
Yep.
So that's why I'm here promoting the whole thing. We have lots of competition out there, and there's lots of individuals just doing their own brand, looking through their menu, seeing what they could extract from it. But back to your point on longevity, the first thing we do is, even though we make a noise about the celebrity and our style and our packaging, of course, they're core food genres. We're not reinventing the wheel. If you had one of the third-party platforms on the panel today, they would tell you that pizza, 5 types of chicken, 3 types of Asian cuisine, burgers, soups and salads, vegan, etc. are the buzzwords, and each one has a various percentage of total sales in the country,
right.
In some ways regional. So we're playing in those same platforms, whilst Mr. Beast has unique packaging that causes lots of Instagrammable moments, it's still a split-top bun, an 80-20 beef smash burger with a crinkle-cut fry. So we're just dressing it differently, but there's nothing, I mean, we are doing some weird little smaller brands resonating with different sectors, but principally we're in the business of mainstream large amount of feeding.
Right. Robert, you said something about the fact that virtual brands are now a part of our regular conversation. 2 years ago, we weren't talking about that, right? One of the things that brings all of you four here today is innovation. And when you think about innovation in the past couple of years, it has rapidly sped up so that now virtual brands are a part of the conversation when they weren't 2 years ago. And that was by necessity. You know, a lot of what I've talked to with folks over the past year is this idea of forced innovation. Everybody was faced with this challenge of pivoting, and they did so through innovation. I'd like to open up to the panel to talk about what the concept of innovation means to each of you. I'm going to start with Wade, because innovation's in your title. What does innovation mean to you today, and how has it really changed in the past year?
What it means to me is disruption. You got to disrupt I firmly believe that you got to disrupt your existing model, or someone else is going to disrupt you. We see it today. And you know, when I think about innovation for us, the litmus test for us really comes down to, is it a big enough idea? Is nobody else doing it? And do we think that the world will adopt it? Will it go to where we think the world is going? And I actually just recently gave a presentation at a supplier conference internally that talked about this evolution that we're on. And I think it's really important to understand that, because mobility was the first phase of that evolution. And that started back, I mean, when we introduced the smartphone, right? And then now we're kind of in this like gig economy where you've got all these people that are rethinking, hey, and it wasn't because of COVID, right? This started back when all these companies started to get on board and say, hey, there's a delivery opportunity, or we can actually get the product to people with the touch of a button. And we're kind of in the midst of that evolutionary phase. And then I think the next phase that's coming, and don't quote me, I don't know how many phases we're in, but just like in evolution, I think the next phase that's coming very rapidly is robotics. And whether that robotics is applied to last mile delivery through drone or autonomous vehicle, or that's in the back of a restaurant because of labor and wage pressures, or it's in the front of the restaurant with, you know, our affinity towards Star Wars, right? And BB-8 and R2-D2, right? There's something innate with us now because we've grown up with that. And I see these phases, and when I think about innovation, I think about, okay, of the seeds that have been planted, of the foundation that we have, where are we going to go? And as you map that through, you start to see, okay, here's where the world could very well go. And it's kind of squishy 3 years out, but it gets a lot firmer 2 years out, and then a year out, you start to go, okay, I can see this absolutely happening. That's just kind of how I frame it, and that's how our team kind of looks at it.
Yeah, what about the rest of you? When you think about innovation, what does that mean for you?
Well, you know, what comes top of mind for me is, you know, just staying really closely in touch with where your core consumer, the guest is, the capabilities of your people, right? The core capabilities of your organization, and then moving in a space that allows you to capitalize on that and take advantage of whatever that change may be. It's definitely not innovation for the sake of innovation, for the sake of that next shiny penny that creates distraction. It really is taking your core capability and leaning to opportunities that the market presents to you, right? And that's that intimacy that I talked about earlier. Never lose sight of what our guests want, what the consumer wants, what you're capable of, and what our team members or your people do and can feel. That guest experience will never be better than theirs, right? And so it's got to be in balance with everything that's happening and moving in the market.
James, innovation, I imagine, for you has to be a little bit different than what these guys are looking at for innovation, because again, coming back to people innovation. So what does that mean for you?
Yeah, so literally just the build for me on this whole notion of never losing sight of what your guests, for me, it's who are your guests, and what does that look like in terms of what the guest is looking for. I mentioned in my prior comments this notion of 2 or more races. We are becoming this cross-section of people that are experiencing our foods, our products differently than they have. They're practicing at home, mixing different cultures with food. And so how do we leverage our people inside the organization? Again, this whole notion of making sure we have representation. How do we make sure that we have all of that represented in our organization, in our food innovation teams, in our leadership? When we think about how we market to people, how do we market our brands to these different demographics? It is going to be all about innovating on how do we connect and engage. I think, and we've taken some hits for it, but if you look at our Taco Bell brand with our partnership with Lil Nas X, right? This is a form of innovating as it pertains to connecting with different communities in different ways. And so that innovation around people and holistically thinking about the value that people bring to our organizations, not in just who they are as employees for us, but in terms of who they are with life experiences and how do we innovate around those life experiences to create the products and the culture in our organization that has customer-wise people coming to us, but talent-wise people wanting to come to work for us because we do represent who they are.
There's something really powerful in that. Sorry, I'm just jumping in. Diversity of thought is only accomplished through diversity of people, right? And I think that you can get caught into thinking that, we'll have innovation, right? We're going to have an innovation department, but unless it's truly diverse in thought and lifestyle and backgrounds and understanding, you won't tap into the actual potential that it has. And I think it's super powerful, the point made of just ensuring that innovation is also not divorced from diversity.
That's an interesting point, because it's forced innovation, this concept of, when I think about a trend, let's say sriracha a couple of years ago, it's almost like everybody innovated because they felt they had to.
Right.
But it's a culture of innovation that is natural to a company. How do you cultivate that? Robert, you've been doing this for a long time, and you've been innovative for a long time.
You mean I'm old?
You have an impressive resume.
I'm certainly not as sophisticated as this gentleman here. I approach it slightly more mundanely in my particular case. If everyone here was going for lunch and they ordered a burger, and then they said to the server, when it's finished, would you mind putting it in a cardboard box and bringing it to me 40 minutes time? That's the world I'm in.
Yep.
So I think about it from that perspective in every way. How do we narrow that number of minutes? How can I make that box a better box in every single way, from insulation to steam to the cost of it, because the better the box, the more it costs, and my partners have to get their multiple on that, etc., etc. So to Wade's early points on the kitchen and the comments from the Portillos side, everything, all of these factors added together, it's all happening, but it's just going to constantly improve. I have friends that own one of these delivery businesses in Poland, and he has algorithms that show that he's selling 25, I'm making the number up, margarita pizzas between 8 and 9 p.m. in downtown Warsaw. He's ordering them in advance. I mean, that's innovation. Yeah. He's got them already in the car, and he's waiting for the orders to come in. To the last mile comment, to the amount of time before it's consumed, people are being innovative. They're trying out drones. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Just every aspect of it. In the delivery business, obvious statement, from the moment it's cooked until it gets to you at the table is when all bad things happen. There are so many. The kitchen cooked it too quickly, and the driver hasn't arrived. The driver's arrived and it's not cooked. The driver's got the wrong address for the restaurant. The driver's got the wrong address for the home. And it just continues and continues. And of course, now with social media, the level of complaints, and then there's a whole skill innovatively to responding. We were in a competition where some of Mr. Beast fans would compare our response time with the big boys. And that became a sport. And then there's other crazy things. There was a terrible complaint, photographs and all, and it was damaging for us. we finally got hold of the person that did it, and he said to us, no, the experience was perfect. We said, what are you talking about? You just hurt us. He said, I got 25,000 new followers in that way.
Wow.
He managed to get himself onto the Twitter. So we're combating so many things, but we're all pioneering.
Yeah.
So it's great fun.
To that end, what inspires you to innovate? Because again, you could talk about innovation as I have to do this. We had a lot of that last year because it was like, oh, I need delivery all of a sudden. I need to have off-premise strategy, omni-channel. But I mean, the four of you here are innovators beyond simply responding to the moment. So how can you look ahead? How can you keep inspired and innovate even when innovation's not demanded of you?
Well, I'll go first. I'm just a sicko. I am just driven. It's just who I am. I've been with my wife 49 years, and I think the secret is only 2 days a week. I'm working the rest of the time. I have notes around the house from the minute I wake up to go to sleep. It's just within me, and I've been blessed that I have a lot of people that have been with me for the whole journey. One of them's out there, sitting there now, and we all just have that same work ethic, and we're in such a fascinating industry.
Yep.
It's ever-changing. It's just not the same thing every day.
What the rest of you guys have places to turn to, people you talk to? What are those sources of inspiration?
Well, I'm going to just riff on something that James said earlier, and he was talking about creating safe spaces. And for us, we are very focused on creating those safe spaces throughout everything that we do conversationally, right? Whether it's a meeting, a visit to the restaurant, our one-on-one conversations, we always carve out time to say, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What's on your mind? What's working for you? What do you need? How are you feeling? Where are you at? And I think it's creating safe spaces and a speak-up culture allows you to bubble up concerns, issues. Everyone's connected to the marketplace vis-a-vis something, right? And technology is flowing at amazing paces. The macroeconomic climate is flowing so fast that the only way that you can be completely in touch with it is through the diversity, conversation, and safe space connection with your people. Right? When that happens, you can move at rapid paces in the right direction, leveraging your core capability. Sure. And so it was so critical to me because even as small as we are, we're building some systems and processes that create that speak-up culture innately to this organization.
Yeah. James, anything to add about where you turn to for inspiration?
Wow. I just love what you said. That was awesome. What inspires us around this whole notion of innovation is we are, our customers, our guests inspire us in the context of we're legacy brands. And being legacy brands, we have people that, if you look at our Pizza Hut business, they're people they grew up with Book It, right? These, oh my God, I was a Book It kid too. People are like, James, I was a Book It kid. And they're like 60 years old, right? But then now some of their kids' are still Book It kids, right? So people are experiencing our brands, and it becomes part of their lives. So part of the inspiration around innovation is how do we remain relevant in the lives of not only those who started their engagement with us, but now their kids. And so it's this whole notion of how do we stay relevant through innovation for generations, not just the group that we're looking at today. And if you look at our Taco Bell brand, our Taco Bell brand is masters of innovation. It's like, James, but they have the same 18 ingredients, but they keep doing it. How does that work? Innovation, right? And it's so much so that people are like, it's the same ingredient, but it's so, that Taco Bell, right? And so people get energized by being a part of a brand that is innovative So that inspires us to continue to do that across all of our brands, not just Taco Bell.
Yeah. Wade, you said something earlier about how we're not really sure where we are in the pandemic, right? I mean, we're not sure if we're still in the middle of it, if we're after it. But I think it's clear that as far as the pivots that we all had to make, that part of it is in the past. But we also now live in a present in which innovation, I think, is that we have more pressure to innovate than ever before, arguably, because of what we've been through. I'm curious from all of you, but I'll start with you, Wade, about the future of innovation and how we feel like this has all changed for us over the past 18 months.
I wish I had something super, insightful. For me, it's we're in a different place now than we've been in the past. I think, you've heard people stand on stage in multiple conferences and say, the last 5 years we've innovated more than we did the first 35 years before. The last 18 months has been bananas. And my team knows I use that term all the time when things are crazy, right? It's bananas for us. But I don't think it's going to slow down. I think if anybody in this room honestly believes that we're going to go back to the way it was, is crazy. Because we're on a totally different time continuum, right? To quote Back to the Future Part 2 and the Biff world, like we're in a different world. And I think innovation is going to be the key to keeping up. As technology continues to evolve, and I say tech meaning the phone, right? That first phase of the evolutionary process. As that continues to evolve, consumers' expectations continue to evolve. And that Amazonian effect, I think you guys have heard that before, of the expectation that I can order on Christmas Eve morning and have it delivered Christmas Eve night to hand it to my wife for a Christmas present, is now set. And there's no going back. And so whether that's in marketing, whether that's through diversity, whether that's through just innovation of your own world, it's happening. And the pedal is down. You talked earlier about the things that, how we find inspiration when we're motivated, right? I think for me, there's two things that motivate me. Scared to death of becoming irrelevant. That scares me every morning out of my bed to run hard. But the other thing that motivates me more than anything is to just absolutely be the best. To be so great at what I do that I'm proud of what I've become and what I've done. And I think it's the combination of those two things that are going to really, for me, that helps me find inspiration and look, whether it's in retail or the service industry or medicine or wherever it is, to see how that's evolving. But it's not just in food service. The whole world is now on this continuum where we're going to have to evolve at a breakneck pace to remain relevant.
Yeah. I think part of that evolution is all about your ability to learn quickly, because learning is inextricably linked to growth. Innovation for what? We want to grow, right? We want to thrive. We want to be more than we were today, and so the ability to stay tapped in this learning space, learning environment, whether it be your people, your guests, other leaders, is going to be critical. A quick story, I was in a board meeting with Berkshire in March, and we started talking about an IPO. And I said, as we walk through the paces, what would our timing be for this IPO? And they said around October. And I said, oh shit. The world's gonna change before October comes, right? And why did I say that? It's because I've learned so much, I've seen so much. And so our mindset now is, how do we learn fast, test fast, fail fast, scale fast, right? That's what we do. We go, that looks good, it makes sense, it's gonna meet a need, we can do it, test it. That sucked, move on, let's go, right? Or that was great, scale it tomorrow. We've gotta be there. Because the market, information-wise, experiential-wise, is moving so fast on a macro basis, not my small town, but on a macro basis, that you've gotta be able to learn quickly, fail fast, scale fast.
Yeah.
Just again, back to this whole notion of the people side of this innovation and everything that these gentlemen have said around, it's not going to go back. It is going to continue to not just stay where it's at, but go faster and do everything that was just described. I think where we need to think about innovation is, how do we take care of our people as we do all of that? How do we make sure when we are scaling and we're failing and all those kinds of things, and Wade, to your point, you're like, I wake up every day, I want to be the best. We have people who are driven like that. At the pace that we're asking people to go now, the conversations that I'm having is, how do we take care of people, not only physically, but how do we take care of them mentally as we ask for what we're asking for from them every single day? How do we create the cultures that we need to have where you do everything that was just described, but you do it in a way that people feel whole, they feel heard, valued, understood, and recognized for what they're doing and taken care of holistically. So I think there needs to be some innovation around that. One of the conversations that I'm having right now is, do we have a employee resource group? We have a number of employee resource groups. But now the question is, do we have an employee resource group around mental health? How do we help people? Because people are they're redlining every single day trying to do things and doing more than they've ever had to do, both personally and professionally, simultaneously. And the only thing we're asking for them is everything that we just talked about. So I think there needs to be some innovation around how do we take care of our people in these times, because what we're seeing is people are opting out.
Yeah. Robert, I'm going to give you the final word. What's your assessment of
Well,
the state of
firstly, I want
innovation?
to ask how innovative Yum are. Will they loan him out? Because he says great things.
That's right.
I would say ours is a little different situation because we spoke at the beginning about how we're constantly creating new brands with partners. So it allows us to take whoever is cutting edge in whatever direction they're going. So that keeps us fresh from that side, which is an advantage. Where we need to be innovative is to understand how the consumer is changing. And of course, that consumer is also that same employee that you just spoke about. We don't really understand where they're going to land. We're all suffering probably identical problems wearing our hats as owners. We've got people that are saying, I don't want to be in a hot kitchen. We've got people that are saying, I'm not going to stand up for all these hours. We've got people that are saying, I don't want to do every evening. We've got people in the office that are saying, I don't want to drive in anymore, and I prefer the variable work week. And combating all of those is in every single industry with different issues, and no one yet understands where any of it's going to land. If unemployment payments dry up, is that going to change the mindset? Or are people just the percentage of offices that are going to be empty, and the impact that's going to have on restaurant outlets that principally got their business from the daytime? I went to 2 offices in Denver. You could shoot a cannon through them and not hit anyone.
I hope you didn't do that.
I would have.
Well, gentlemen, it is our pleasure to honor you with the Inaugural Creators Awards. We are inspired by you, and I'm sure our whole audience is inspired by you. Let's give one last round of applause to our Creators winners. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Nice
And to
meet
close
you.
out the show,
Great
one
stuff.
last time, I'm going to welcome
Great stuff.
my colleague, Susan Szymanski, to the stage.